Oh, there. Does it tell you it's recording?
Yep.
There you go. All right. Well, like any podcast, what do? They like, hello. Hey, Shane.
Hi.
Gosh, it's so good to see you. Honestly, I haven't seen you at
Since high school?
school. God, that's been.
I think it's high school.
It's 2020. It's 15 years. It's 15.
Yes.
Whatever. Holy cow, man.
That is so long to go without seeing somebody and then just being like, let's have a conversation.
I think the most amazing part of it for me just is how where I am is so directly influenced by our time together.
Oh, same. I play my guitar every day. Still.
I,
Yeah.
it's amazing, like how impactful. It seems such like a silly thing. In fact, I do remember one thing I wanted to share with you. I can't play it, but it goes like this: Get up, jump around, let's have some fun. I don't know if
Because
you're.
you played with Josh and I for a long time.
Yeah, that's where it all began, man.
I know.
That's where it started. Like,
Okay, this will crack you up. But so I'm living in Sarnia, Ontario right now.
mm-hmm.
Long story. We can go through it if you want. But because of COVID, I hang my guitar right on the wall so that I just grab it, right? Like I just pick it up and I just go sit on the couch and I play a couple licks and hang it back up on the wall. But when I was still in British Columbia, I bought this gorgeous Epiphone. It's a semi-hollow body and it's blue. And I bought it because I had a buddy that was just really good at guitar and really into like his sounds and was a super nerd. And he set this guitar up. And so I know that he set it up really well. He just is like, I'm moving on. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And so I was like, oh, I'll buy it because I know that he just really prefers quality. And so I bought the guitar, I would say probably 5 years ago, but I never really could find an amp for it. And but when we were playing together music, you and I had this amp that was unbelievable. It was called a Fender Ultra Chorus. Mm-hmm. And so here in Sarnia, since COVID, like I think a lot of all industries, everything has moved online. And so an auctioneer actually in the area moved his business online. And so now you can just go online and see what's for sale and bid on these things. And I always just kind of keep my eye on them. I'm one for a good deal. And so I always go through and just scroll like what's for sale. And I found that amp that I had in high school. It's called a Fender Ultra Chorus. And I got a great deal on it. But when I had it in high school and I sold it, I regretted it immediately. I was like, oh, it was a really good amp. I gave it away for hardly anything. I think I sold it for like $200. And I was like, man, I should have kept that amp. So when I found it, I was over the moon because it has really interesting sounds. So yeah, that's where I'm at now. Like that's, all these years, 15 years. And music is just still such an aspect of both of our lives, all three of our lives. That's what I loved about your conversation with Mike the last time was like, holy cow, like, like we already knew, I think then, like, I'd be really interested to hear where Josh is at. Like, what is that guy doing?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he's playing drums. I'm sure he's still playing drums.
He went in the military, didn't he? He was in like the Army or the Marines.
He went Marine Corps, I think. And that's when I lost touch with him. He also went to Grand Valley, I think.
It's amazing.
Where did you go to school?
I jumped around a little bit. in search of myself, but I ended up at a Columbia College
Mm,
here in Chicago, and then finishing it up at Northeastern Illinois, which is in the same. It's still in Chicago. So that's where I ended up,
cool.
just chasing the dream of music, or discovering oneself
Yeah.
in the big city.
Yeah.
But I can't help but notice that you're in Canada.
Yeah.
Like I thought you're gonna not go to Canada. I don't know. How does that happen?
Great question.
Yeah.
Well, I got because I left high school and I went to this pretty conservative Christian school, um, but I went there to kind of go like a ministry pathway, but ended up in their sort of worship vein back in music, actually. So I did a bachelor's there in worship arts, and then got a job opportunity on a place called Vancouver Island on the very west coast of Canada. An unbelievable spot. Uh, go Google Vancouver Island, and it will blow your mind. You know, to give an indication of how small McBain is, because I think that's what your question is rooted in. Like, how did you go from McBain to Canada? Because McBain is a very unique conservative, like, just very. It's almost like a step back in history to go to McBain. Um, and so I ended up out there because when we went and visited for the job interview, we were like, "This is unbelievable." Emma and I had gotten married the August, like right after I got out of school, and yeah, we got a job opportunity out there. We're like, "Let's go!" Like, we're young, like, this is an incredible place to end up for a while. So we spent 4 years on the island, just kind of, joining the workforce and having that first job, but getting to lead worship every week. And music, I discovered in college music. Like, already then I was playing my guitar almost every day. And discovery of self, I've just learned that it's a language that I have, that I just long to speak every day. And that's really played itself out in my kids. What I love about Ira and Marin, our little kids, is that they both just love singing. And it's like, it's yeah, it's such a joy. Because I remember, like, so we ended up out there because it it was just like such a wonderful place to go and start our life together. But then we moved off the island to just outside of Vancouver, an hour and a half to the east, community there called Chilliwack. We were in a little sub community of Chilliwack called Yarrow, and we at that point moved into what's called an eco village. So an eco village is, the primary thrust of their sort of perspective on the world is, let's make as little of an impact as possible, and then let's live in intentional community while doing that. So just a wonderful experience, really deep, rich community, rich in the sense, like, yeah, there's a huge range of people that live there, lots of young families, retired people, widowed people, all the pieces necessary to make up the fabric of a diverse community. And we loved our time there. It was the hardest thing that we've ever done, but also the most amazing thing that we've ever done.
What was
You
hard?
just doing authentic community, man. Like, us millennials have this romanticized idea that everybody gets along. It doesn't work that way. Life is actually more raw than that. And you know, we were always told as kids, you guys are winners. Like, you get a prize, you get a prize. Everybody gets a prize for doing everything. And at least that was, my perspective of our childhood. And so when you get out in the real world, you discover that people can actually be really terrible sometimes. And it's how you rise up to that adversity, I think, in your lives, that determines how you come out of it. And
You mentioned like perspective a couple times, and I think that that's really interesting because recently you've started doing more online video sermons
yeah,
or readings.
yeah,
I don't know if this is a recent thing. Did it? Because I just saw the video pop up in my like feed, and I was like checking it out. And then you did another one like the other day. It's
yeah.
just, and then your perspective. Like, how did you gain this perspective of like mixing the church and all of the struggles with people and music?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a really good question. Uh, I think that perspective was gained. You have to go back to our childhood, like our discovery of music. Um, the community that you and I grew up in is very insular. It's a very old way of life. There's still lots of fundamentalism built into the fabric, the philosophy of the community. I was raised kind of from a perspective that that the things I was being told were sort of absolute truths, and that I was definitely supposed to believe them. And but it was fundamental. It was rooted in this, like, this is how it's always been, and we're not about to change that. And I think that discovery took place, especially when you sort of think about in the perception of like community. I grew up, I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but I grew up with a very large family in my midst in that community. So when I left that, I never really understood the value of that until I was outside of it. And where am I going with this? I guess like from the perspective of like music and how that connected to the community, when I discovered that there were people outside of that insular community that were also really special and had really great perspective, the thing that you know, one of the people I met in my community was his name was Adam, and he's an atheist, and I'm a Christian. So but you know, I've challenged a lot of my faith because I I was never one to just accept things as given to me. I you know, in terms of my Enneagram, I'm a 7, which I think is the debater, right? Is that right? I don't know. I could be getting those numbers wrong, but point is the one that I land on is I'm the debater. And so I just like challenge everything. It's like anything that's thrown at me, I'm like, I'm always seeing the worst of it, and so on and so forth. So,
I saw
but
that I saw that in you early on. Like
yeah,
one of the things like where my journey began is because when I met you, you challenged the status quo of what music should be or how kids can interact. I had always been in like the sports, doing sports. I never knew that you could really do music together like that without parents having to set up the rules and set up the structure.
yeah,
You and I think what you're talking about is like you questioned a lot of things that I never really thought to question before, and it seems like you keep doing that.
yeah.
Maybe the guiding
And
principle.
yeah, and that's where I'm going with that, because I think like, because your question also had it at how does that tie to music? I think music was that first time I could like really experience like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling something inside of me right now in the midst of this song. And hilariously, that was like Limp Bizkit when I was in middle school. Like these like if you sit down and listen to the lyrics of those songs now today, you know, like I was just like a raging adolescent. And you know, like I remember so many of our conversations as teenagers amongst each other was like, oh, music is somewhat my savior right now. Like these words stir up emotions in me. Linkin Park, I mean, if you can remember back to those days, was like, that song, you felt something in singing those songs. And I think, that's what we experienced together as like co-musicians, was this like, wow, we're feeling something right here. And I know that, looking back now in our adolescence of music as well, like we were terrible at that time, like we've all actually gotten a skill now, but you know like you sprung us with as we started our conversation, it's been the thing that helped us become who we are. I mean, you know I loved your conversation with Mike, because it was like, oh my gosh, like I saw that in middle school. Like he and I started with a guitar and a drum in his basement um, when we were in 8th grade. Like that's where it all started. We were just like blown away.
Yeah.
But like we experienced that together, because we started playing in a band together, and man, you guys were my best friends. It was Kyle's accident that stopped all of that for us.
Yeah, that was a really traumatic time for a lot
Oh
of
my
people.
gosh, for all of us. Yeah.
Shout out to Kyle Schmid.
Yes. Love you, brother.
Still think of him. Like I still think of like what he's going through, and I'm sure a lot of people don't get enough time, or like they do think of him, but maybe
Mhm.
haven't like gone there to like see him again since his accident. It's hard to face things like that, and I don't think
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And you're never ready for trauma.
Yeah,
But as adolescents, that was earth shattering to us. Like, oh my gosh, somebody close to me
yeah.
um, can be taken away in the blink
What
of an
year
eye.
that was? 92
Yes.
year?
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
had a lot.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, not to get too heavy about it, but
No, but
like and
tell me
so
about you're like a worship leader, man. You are like you look you're the guy. Like, it looks like you're the guy. Like you're leading you're leading the charge. For so many people's like well-being, health, spirituality, all
yeah,
like, and you're a father.
yes, it's life is full right now for
Yeah,
sure. Um, I it's really intriguing. Because my life has changed a lot. Emma and I left Michigan and moved all the way to the west coast of Canada, lived on an island in the Pacific Ocean, and like really became uh, one as a unit, not only in our marriage, but just like in our discovery of self. Um, and that actually led me out of ministry for quite a long period. I think it was, let's see, 2014, 15, 16, 17, spring of 2017, I stepped out of ministry. I was burnt out. Something about ministry is it's very easy for your relationship to God to become one of a professional transaction. And so what I mean by that is when you're a pastor, you're interacting with God constantly. I mean, it's supposed to be your calling, but burnout creeps in and your relationship becomes transactional. So you're interacting with God because you have to, because your work demands it. And I don't know if this exhibited itself when I was a teenager, but I'm assuming it did. I'm one to I lead with my heart, I think, like just as a person. So I was just having a meeting with a gentleman from our community here, and I said to him, like I take so many things personal. It's something I'm working on, but it's an aspect of my personality because I just invest so emotionally in what I'm doing, and I'm assuming that was the same in high school as it is now, but I find that that's a strength. And what I discovered about the self and self-discovery is I had reached a point in my like career, I guess, where I was like, like I still believe this stuff, but mostly in my head right now. And yeah, so I stepped out and did farming for a while and found out that I really love that too. And want to find a way to mix those two things, as well as ministry. And just like it's all the things kind of coming together, like that makes us who we are and that makes us tick. And
is that hard stepping out from that ministry? Is that difficult?
And no, it was not difficult. It was necessary. Plus, in addition to that, at the Eco Village, we discovered a really rich community, and we kind of we found that, and I still find this within church communities, but it often feels like it's the environment of the leadership and strategies has become very professional. Like what's our 5-year goals and how do we get there, and versus like who are the people in your midst and how do you work together as a people. We really learned that by living in the Eco Village community, because they had some key aspects of the continuity of the community, meaning like the day-to-day stuff like mowing lawns and watering the flowers, the community flowers and stuff. They decided that they wanted to do that stuff in unison as a community, instead of pay a company in to do it for them. So in essence, you committed to working together as a community towards common things. And that can just be hard because there's conflict. People have different opinions for how things ought to be done, or different standards for cleanliness, and that's the real stuff of life. Like those are the types of things that creep into conflicts in marriage. Those are the types of things that cause division between siblings. Those things are super critical aspects of human interaction. So we discovered in the Eco Village that it was, from our perspective, really cool because we lived that. And there were some conflicts that, even for myself personally, were hard to resolve and even remain unresolved, because it's just an aspect of being human. And so, and like, that's what I love about song. That's what I love about music, is through melodies, through chords happening in the back, or that those interactions, you can feel tension in music, and you can feel elation in music, and you can feel community in music when you hear all the parts put together. And that's why throughout all of this stuff, music has always been there and it helped me articulate. And I do write some stuff, and it's all an articulation of moments that I found myself in as I came along.
I was just thinking about music and how do some people stop doing music. You hear, of course, you see me, I'm a piano teacher and I've been teaching lots of kids, and I'm wondering why did the kids stop taking piano lessons, or why do people not how come more people don't experience what we're talking about? It almost feels like in some way that more people should experience either music, art, something. I guess I don't remember what I was going to say earlier, because I was thinking I was going to tell you this, but then I can't remember it. So, but the main point is, what is the main point? I'm sorry.
I think what you're getting at, is so our deep love for music has
Like, why us?
grasped us in such a way that we've made a life of it.
Yeah.
Um, so my response to that is, I think everybody is innately musical in some way. Everybody loves song. We have differences in our love for song, but everybody loves song. I've not met a person who's like, doesn't have some form of musical preference or is like, forget it, just turn music off. I can't do it. They might, people will often say that, but primarily because they have a disagreement with the style. So, they're really into rap. I don't want to listen to classical, whatever. Who cares?
Do you have that with
But
are there styles of like religion or ways to communicate like the word of God? Because I know you do that.
yeah, that's a good question. I would say the answer is yes to that. Um, I think, though, our deficiency in that is we focus too much on our differences and not enough on our unity.
Mm.
And and I I think that we don't tend to do that with song. We don't tend to judge someone because they like rap. We don't tend to judge someone because they like honky tonk. I don't know, right? Like, so that's what's really intriguing to me is that we have this innate knowledge for how to get along.
Being in Chicago and I married a woman from Thailand. Um, I have seen a lot of different religions, and there's so many different kinds, and then
Mm-hmm.
subsects of those religions, and they seem to tend to all preach the same thing, but everybody says it in a different way, and I'm still on my spiritual journey with God, and I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are. I'm sure you are too.
Absolutely.
What is talk to me about that? Tell me, you're dealing with this way more than I am. So, what is your experience with like people who have, maybe stepped away from the church or are with it or not with it totally? How do you get people back on?
You know, this is what I loved. I'm going to come back to my best friend, my atheist friend, Adam. He helped me finally at least find some peacefulness in this topic because Adam was one of the most thoughtful, deep thinking, and highly intelligent um, persons I've ever met, and non-judgmental and caring and loving. Like a lot of the aspects that, at least for me, the primary reason I've landed on Christianity, because I think that's part of what's behind this question, has been the person of Christ and how he loved differently in his culture and how his teaching, at least to me, was love unconditionally. And then I will pay the price of deficiencies. So there's no cost for loving like this. There's uh, and so to me that's the perfect modeling of that unconditional love. And I think that um, that's why my heart really aches and breaks for the different struggles that we have as a culture, specifically surrounding topics about love and our inability to do that without strings attached. So that's why I land on Christianity. But like, I have a lot of friends who have different perspectives, and I don't challenge those perspectives because I'm like, like, God is enormous, and to try to box him in a way that excludes others, like, I think that's what's, again, this is another reason, but to me that's what's at the heart of Christianity, is like everyone's invited. um there's no exclusions, and I just think God's a really big God that's um, that's capable of much more than our human constructs can imagine. And that's how I land on it. And like, I don't know. I don't think that gets me in trouble with my denomination, but like that's the type of stuff that I wish would break down. And that's why I compared it to music in that way. Like, we know how to get along, like we know how to have differences and exist in unity, but we overthink it. Like, we don't celebrate those differences often. We try to sterilize one another, and I just don't think that's very healthy.
Well, like you said, you lead with your heart, and sometimes it's better to do that than to try to overthink it, like you're saying.
Right.
Lead with the heart, and whatever feels right, it's usually the right thing to do.
Yeah.
At least I found, anyways. I don't know. When you say you get emotionally involved with what you do, now I feel the same way with my students. When for whatever reason, even if they're moving to another city, or they're like, hey, we're gonna take a break from piano lessons, because like every piano teacher has this. You would invest so much, and then they're like, we're gonna take a break. You're like, no, no, please. So bringing it all the way back to like when you took a step from ministry, you took a step back because you said you needed to. I sometimes wonder about that, like when I have students and they're doing music, and I think this is what I was trying to say earlier, but didn't know how to put it into words until listening to you. Um, is when you're doing ministry or music, in my case, these students they love it, but they don't love it, and then they need to stop. But they should continue to do it because they have this opportunity to do it, which was given to them by their parents and the society we're in. And but yet these students are still left with the emptiness of like, why do I have to do this when all of the opportunities are there? And I still struggle with that question. Like, why do students stop taking piano lessons? Why do people fall away from God? I'm sure in your, or why do people stop? And what makes them start again? Those are kind of like the questions that I'm always asking myself. Like, what causes that?
Yeah.
I don't
You
know.
know, it, it's an intriguing question. I think um I think how I land on this one specifically, because it's a like as somebody who's done ministry and would consider himself a pseudo pastor right now. Um, I think where I arrive on that and again, this is in my mind's eye where music helps me understand this, is that it's still there. Like, your questions about God, even though you may not, maybe you're more on the agnostic spectrum where you're like, I think there's a God, but I don't know if I have the energy to really nail down that God. Or maybe I don't have a desire to nail down that God. But like I just have this inkling, yeah, like sure, like God is out there. That's similar to music. Like some of us, like really make it our life's effort to make sure music doesn't die. And there are all different tiers of professionality in that pursuit. But in the background is this, like, everybody. That's why I said I've never met a person who doesn't love music. It's still there. So, and I know for a lot of people, that's their relationship to God too. Is just like it's Shane has made it his life's effort to communicate, his faith or whatever. I wouldn't say that's necessarily true, but clearly that's happening. But secondly, like, I also know what it's like to be in the background and be like, look, I know there's like this innate godness there, but that's the only thing pulling me along right now. I know what it's like to be in that space where, like, I don't want to do this right now. And that diversity is necessary because and this is why community to me becomes so important, because you learn that you need people in your midst to do the things that you're not good at. right? We need our accountants. We need our administrators. We need our visionaries. We need our, I mean, the list goes on of the different skills you need in order for a community to sort of be whole. And so to me, you know, like, let's find ways to celebrate that, and allow this thing that's like holding us together. Like, I believe in God. Maybe it's not the Christian God, but you know, something's out there. Let's let that be our focus, and find out where it takes us. Because I think
Do that without a. You have a church without walls. Is that what your church is? Online?
and that's really funny because I come from a very conservative Christian perspective. This is I think this is what's decimated a lot of like churches in terms of like, if you look specifically at like numerics, you know, like lots of churches are like, we're seeing 60% come back because of the pandemic at best right now. Part of that is to comfort people and say like, look, this is only a period of time. Things will be different. There's a lot of really scared people right now. So let's all just calm down. Like, the last pandemic was 1920 and it took 2.5 years to come out of it. Okay. So we're only 9 months in. So that's kind of, you know, my first thing. But I think, you know, like, I come from a I tell that because I come from a pretty conservative background where it's hard to think outside of our walls. And maybe that's because a lot of, you know, like, society is shifting right underneath us. For millennia, it has always been physical interactions with your community. You go to the baker to get your bread, you go to the grocer to get your sugar, but most of us lived on farms, you know, like, and so now, though, in the past 100 years that has shifted, and even in the past 20 years, Chris, you and I were friends when I got my first cell phone. Yeah. And now look at, you know, we established a timeline. It's been 15 years since we talked. Like, what we're doing right now was unthinkable to me when I was a teenager. And that's how fast change is happening in our midst. And so I, you know, like, I think that's a pretty meta question that you've asked, like, how, you know, is this beyond four walls? Because I think that shift is happening culturally. Like, how we're interacting with one another is literally changing. And it's fascinating. You know, like, the sociological studies that will come from like the boom of technology, things are going to look so different. And, you know, in a lot of ways, when it comes to those types of topics, I just feel like, man, I'm just along for the ride. I don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of my students are online. I think, like, you know, like the conversation with Mike, this conversation with you, and it's so nice to be able to revisit like conversations too, like digitally, to just kind of like whatever message you're putting out there, you can pause it, you can rewind it, you can kind of get over a little bit more.
Yep.
Like, what was your first one? The first video you did, you know, I watched that in parts. Like, I did 5 minutes this day, and next day I did 15 minutes, and the next day I finished it because things happen. And I thought it's almost more thoughtful of a way to deliver a message than just saying, okay, you have to be here at this time and be completely focused from this time to this time. If you lose focus, you'll miss the message.
Yep.
And now you can take into consideration a person's life, and they can somewhat cultivate how that message is being delivered.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah. And I think the challenge is how do you deliver a message in bite-sized pieces so that people can actually grab chunks of it, so that they can be like, oh, this helps adjust my thinking. Was how I articulated it to an elderly gentleman that I was meeting with this morning. You know, and it's so critical that you are able to convey that in really articulate ways. And I think that's where growth happens. And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to be, or to be given so much respect inherently, especially as, you know, I consider writing. You know, it's so funny. Mike ended up being such an author of music, and I envy that skill. I've written a couple songs, and I'm very proud of them, and I think they're really well written. But they're similar to, you know, my person. They're quite deep. They're quite so they don't come as, you know, like, and as quickly as I wish they would. But I am an author of words, you know, spoken words and preached words, I guess. And I've discovered that I actually kind of enjoy that, like giving some thought to something that's deep. That kind of stuff gives me life, and it doesn't give life to a lot of people. You know, like I struggle with that same thing. Like, why doesn't anybody want to do this thing called pastoral? You know, like, why wouldn't you want to study the Bible and talk about it? I've had those moments, but you know, like, that's because different things grab us differently. And, you know, for the select few that music grabbed hold of, I don't care. Like, this gives me so much life, and I need to do it every single day. So
You think you'll be doing this for a while?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never put my guitar down.
And what about like just helping? You're such a helper of people. I feel like you're a man of the people in so many ways. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
when I spent my time with you, so comfortable around you. Like it was never. I didn't feel, because I was a total beginner, right? Like, and I was like, bass guitar, what? 4 strings? Just play this. Put your finger here and press it down, and do that 4 times, and then move over here.
That was literally our first lesson. I can like to a T.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Okay.
Do it 4 times, and then here 4 times, and then there.
Hey, thought.
That's so fun. But you know, it's like, oh, it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I let me ask you, what do you think the number one thing is, that the biggest thing that pastors nowadays need to like focus on, or like do, or what are they not doing that you're doing?
I don't know if I'm doing anything profound here. I think something we need to do a lot better as pastors is self-care. I mean, and I think that because the job fundamentally is selfless. And I find that something that I've actually really discovered extremely helpful and profound to me is meditation, which is enormous in sort of the Buddhist religion, because it just causes you to sit and empty yourself, and to draw inward for self-care. And I find that emotionally, spiritually, physically, like in so many different important aspects of self, just really just grounds me. And it's if I'm being really crabby someday, Emma's like, Shane, you need to go to Headspace, like, get out of here. And I go and I do it, and literally it just changes everything. It physically, emotionally, mentally, just totally resets me.
You find that
And
that it's not taught at an early age in schools?
something like meditation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I don't want to get too much into something like that because I could get really lost in it. But I think that yeah, I think historically our lives were more defined previously by a little bit slower pace of life. You know, since the Industrial Revolution as a society, we've just been speeding up and speeding up and speeding up, and technology has accelerated that. And so I think part of what's at the root of you know, just the alarming rates of both like anxiety and depression in our culture is rooted in this inability to stop and do some self-care. Like stop what you're doing, set down your phone, and just like sit with the self. And you know, like I found in the beginning of the practicing of it, I was like, oh, there's a fan on in the room, we gotta go turn that off. Or the neighbors playing music, and oh man, I can't stop listening. Or you know, I can hear so and so fighting again. And so in the beginning, there were like all these distractions going on around me. But then, you know, as I practiced it more and more, it really became something that like it you know, it shows itself when I'm not doing it. And so I think, and I think there's a lot of that needs to happen with you know, spiritual leaders, because unless we're practicing those things and practicing them from the heart, um, I, I I think leadership then starts to break down from there. And so I'm not in any way trying to suggest that I've figured this all out, because I've only just gotten back into trying ministry, because I'm very, you know, like I've made mistakes in the past. I have deficiencies, and but self-awareness goes a long ways. Because my argument at its root is that if you cannot love yourself, you cannot love others. And you know, like, you know, that, and again, that's a fundamental teaching of Christianity, is that God loved us in such a way that he makes us whole again. So despite our deficiencies, you know, we're seen through this lens of like perfection before God because of Jesus. And like I think part of loving and caring in a way that's meaningful and rich and deep requires a care for the self, a care, the ability to love oneself. And yeah, you know, the faster our culture becomes, the more lost that will become, because you know, instead of sitting by the fire stove knitting and talking with one another, or reading something, which not very many people were literate 200 years ago, but you know, now we are just constantly sucking information in, being lost in social media, reading news papers, being entertained by Netflix. You know, we're just, our brains are just numb. So, but you know, that's also disclosure. Just that's been part my experience. I you
think
know,
of
use this word of self discovery. You know,
right.
that's some of my own self discovery.
Yeah, in the interest of self-discovery, I find that a lot of the things like on Netflix and YouTube or whatever, it's all processed information.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And to find that, you know, sitting by the fireside knitting versus getting a bag of Doritos via like YouTube or Facebook news feed, like it's all just processed information. Like all the authentic experiences of like what knowledge is. It's it. I don't know. I feel like it sometimes is. It's just eating like Doritos in my head. If you ever, if you ever understand that.
I love chips.
I love chips. I say Doritos because I eat too many of them already. But like the mind, body, and soul, like slowing down. Everything's
It's
so
yeah.
processed
Yep.
food, processed information,
Yes. Yep.
music in a can. Just
Yep.
boom.
Yep.
Nobody's responsible for making music anymore. Nobody's responsible for creating their own art in their own life. It's just go to Costco or go to Marshalls or Target, pick up some pre-crafted artwork, and just
Yep.
put it on the wall, and good to go. And
Yep.
it's like, where's the responsibility in that all?
Yeah.
Hey, let me
And
buy
this
you
is
dinner. Let me buy you
yeah.
dinner.
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather you make me macaroni and cheese instead. I might
Yeah.
get more from that than
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm too idealist, but I really
I
like.
don't think so. And I think that ties back to some of our previous conversation where I was talking about there's these like innate things within us, and interpersonal connections with other humans, I think, is one of those things that sits inside of us that we can't shake off. Um, and when we do, we break our psychosis in doing it. Again, body and soul. When we lose any interest in anybody but ourselves, which is also a trend right now, we're one of the most narcissistic uh, generations to ever walk the face of the planet. But we break that bond between the two. But I think that bond is sort of fostered and maintained through interpersonal connections with our communities and one another. And that's a really good point.
Well, you bring up such a lot of thoughts and emotions just talking with you. And
I know this is great. We should just
this actually, when you said like, okay, when you said Chris, I was like, he said my name. I was like I haven't heard you say my name. Shane, doesn't it hear your
I
name?
know.
Like, so
I know.
whoa,
Yeah,
Shane,
I'm back in high school. Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
I keep having. I don't know. When I keep thinking of you earlier, I kept envisioning these really tall, gray PA speakers that weren't that powerful. And if you remember,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I just remember
Oh.
those so much. And then like the pole barn,
Yep.
and then
That was we had a lot of good memories up there.
yeah, did some paintball, shot some like rockets,
Yep. Yep.
all the things that
Oh
came.
my gosh, that's right. I tell people that story and they're often like,
Yeah, what is that story? Go ahead and tell us. What was that story, Shane?
"Oh, I don't know." Okay, full disclosure, we
We were young.
uh yeah, we were young. Uh my dad had a grove of pine trees that was about 20 acres, and we went and found bottle rockets. It was also the phase of being in paintball together. And so we thought it would be a brilliant idea to put our paintball masks on and run through the forest with bottle rockets and a lighter, and holding the bottle rocket quite lightly in your hand so that when it took off, it would shoot out of your hand. But then we were firing them at each other from roughly 30 feet away. Um, yeah, doesn't really chalk up very good as wise things to do, but it was hella
We
fun.
have airsoft guns too.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't into airsoft. That hurt too much.
It was painful. Oh man, but oh,
But then college hit, and then, like we,
oops.
like I said, we haven't. This is cool. I did not see this going this big and deep.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I thought like, what? If nobody watches it, fine. I don't care. I'd rather it just be something that I can hold on to.
For sure. Yeah. Yep.
Since you've well, since I've seen you and all that, my mother suffered a stroke, um, and so she lives with me now, and I take care of her, and she can't talk.
Oh,
Uh, Part of like these conversations now are like I miss hearing the voice of people that made an impact in my life, And I thought, well, now this is my way to preserve that.
Hmm.
Could you imagine hearing your grandpa share his thoughts about life and what he experienced as a kid? That would be so cool. Like,
Yeah.
be like, hey, we were young. And it's gonna evolve. By the time you and I are 60, if we make it, I'm sure we're gonna have radically difficult or different ideas about life and what it all means.
Absolutely.
And
And like just some of my own grievance. I sometimes worry that's one of our um, deficiencies, specifically in Christianity, is that we're not formidable to change. And like I've asked those very specific questions to my grandparents because I want to understand, like, what was it like in your childhood, and that's what has like caused me to be like, wow, so much has changed and is changing right now. I'm really sorry to hear about your mom, man. Like that must be so hard to not have basic, efficient communication with one another. Uh, yeah, that
here with
sucks, man.
she's been listening the whole time. She's right behind you.
Oh, good.
So it's been
Connie, right? It was always Miss Morrow. It's Connie, though, right?
yeah.
Hi, Connie.
She's watching her TV show on like mute.
Good.
Yeah, but I guess you know I was thinking our ideas of what's right and wrong and whatever is always changing or evolving. Maybe not changing, but evolving to
Mm-hmm.
understand the nuances of what really makes something better or worse. And I think like as a teacher, when I started, I did it because I loved it. But I see other teachers and I see them. They're like, oh, I'm not ready to do it because I don't know enough. I'm not ready. I'm just not prepared. I'm not a professional. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, there's so many things that people put in front of them to stop them from sharing what they love.
Yeah.
Um, and I imagine that's the same in like ministry too. In some ways, like, do you ever find people who are like, I love Jesus, I love Christ, I love the Word of the Bible, um, but I don't know it all well enough to talk about it, so I just keep it to myself. Do you ever run into people like that?
Yeah. Did you not just describe most of the church? I'm pretty sure you did. So, um, and that's why I admit, from earlier in our conversation, I know what it's like to be in that space, to be like,
Not good enough.
I don't really have time for this right now, and I don't measure up, and like I'm just, not I'm not what you want. But like part of that is my own pittance. Like, I just want to feel pity for myself. And um, I think I I also want to say that that's very normal. In fact, I think that's how most Christians describe their experience with God. I know that you know in a lot of ways that's why living in the eco village community caused me to leave ministry, because in the eco village community people were honest about that, but in the Christian community, because of my title, people were often um, less transparent about that out of a desire to present themselves in a way that, like, oh, I've got this all, don't worry, it's like it's pretty neat, okay, like how I've got it mapped out, because that's how you've taught me to map it out. And you know to think about my grandparents' legacy, I like the legacy that I really want to leave behind is like, were you at least honest with yourself? Like, were you at least like like
Mm,
true to yourself?
that's so good.
Because if like if you were true to yourself, like the love that I experience, that I'm learning because of Jesus, I can't be held back by intimidation of being able to do it. Like, I just have to share that. Like when somebody's really passionate about something, it becomes contagious.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that everybody's passionate about something. Everybody. And
I don't know.
I think so. I think it's changing.
The potential for it. The potential.
Sure.
I
Sure.
don't say that because I'm dealing with 4 and 5-year-olds. Sometimes they don't know anything.
Yeah.
And sometimes they never find that passion.
No. Yeah. It's true. But that's maybe because their parents haven't found it yet. Like the world is quite a it's hard. Like the world is a hard place, and like it's very easy to be hopeless in the world. Like, because like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to get too dark here, but I just think that hopelessness exists when we don't have the ability to look outside ourselves to see something bigger and better than ourselves. And maybe that's just because, I don't know.
Fear? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Fear is a good word there. But that's part of what's been such a comforting aspect of my faith itself, is that, like, okay, like, I hope for a better version of this, because like this is like pretty shitty. So I have expectations of a better this. So and if it's anything like is mapped out in the book that I study, it's unreal. It's unreal. But I think our task is to at least do what we can with the love portion of that, and like, this is what disappoints me the most about America right now, is our inability to love each other despite our differences. There's just like so much hatred for the other side. There's so much division right now. And that's concerning to me, because I think when you emphasize the division, reconciliation just, it can't take place until there's at least a desire for unity. So
good. That's so true. I mean, there's like, you can in America, it's like you can be divided because it's socially acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to work towards unity, because maybe unity is like, it's an expectation. Oh, this is America. Unity will happen anyways, eventually.
Yeah.
And so, like, let's be as divided as we can be. And unity will happen later, after I get what I want.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Oh man, I hate to cut this off. Speaking of kids, like I'm happy to pick this up. Like it's so nice to see you. Like,
it's amazing to hear you. Your stories and where you've been and what you've done is like helpful to me, anyways.
Yeah, it's. Sorry, I'm so deep. I always get myself in trouble for that, because I
got together in the first place. And that's just how we are.
Yeah, it's so good to see you, man.
Hey man, take it easy. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, let's talk soon again. Let's pick this up, catch up. Okay.
Those videos.
Okay, talk to you soon. Bye.